Joey packed the furs he had caught during the trapping season. Today, he was headed to Fairbanks to sell them. For a fur trapper, converting a year's catch into cash is a moment of joy. He also brought along the wolverine fur he had processed yesterday. He was still undecided whether to give the wolverine fur to the family of his deceased friend or sell it in Fairbanks. Not selling would mean his season was barely profitable, but selling would leave him with little to give as a gift. With mixed feelings, he boarded the plane and soon arrived in Fairbanks, 200 kilometers away. He met with fur trader Bill and presented all his catches. Joey didn't know how other trappers fared this season, but he and the other hunters in his town had a tough year due to warm winter weather that halved the trapping season. He had only about 10 mink furs, 2 red foxes, and 1 silver fox, plus the wolverine fur, which he wasn't sure about selling yet and brought just for appraisal. Bill examined each fur for color, fluffiness, and the trapper's skill in processing, which would determine their final selling price. He then priced Joey's furs, $50 each for the red fox furs, $80 for the silver fox, and an average of $60 for the minks. Fur market prices fluctuate, and this year's prices were half of what they were 2 years ago. Bill then turned his attention to the large wolverine fur, rarely seen in such size. Combined with Joey's careful processing, preserving the lips, eyelids, and claws, these details often determine the finished product's price. The wolverine fur was priced at $400, a high price compared to other furs. Joey's total income for the season was roughly $1,200, enough to pay his bills. After some hesitation, he chose not to sell it, considering the low market prices this year, which were more than half down from previous years. Instead, he decided to keep the wolverine fur to give to George's family, acknowledging its special value. On the banks of the Yukon River in Tanana, James was teaching his 2 sons how to shoot. In the indigenous fishing and hunting culture, they started their training relatively late. James began teaching around the age of 10. He first fired a few shots himself, noticed significant inaccuracies, and then adjusted the sight with some tools before reloading and testing again. His family relied on selling firewood in the winter for their livelihood. However, once the road construction brought in cut timber to the town, James's firewood business was completely out of luck. The local water plant wouldn't need his firewood for the next 2 to 3 years. He had no choice but to guide his sons towards becoming hunters to ensure their survival here. After handing the gun to his sons, James taught them the proper use. They were not allowed to shoot within the town, as even small-caliber bullets could easily travel 1 kilometer. Knowing that aligning 2 points is key to hitting a target, they still missed. A slight tremor of the finger could mean a significant miss. 11-year-old Make hit the target after 5 or 6 shots, while the younger Joseph, at 9, missed every time. Older children naturally have some advantages. Once familiar with the shotgun, James took them to the nearby woods. They had no specific hunting targets, simply waiting to see which unfortunate creature would appear first. Signs of thaw were already visible on the Yukon River. They stopped their snowmobile at some deep, dark water pools, indicating deeper water under a meter-thick ice layer, which was still safe to cross quickly. Fast movement is essential in such conditions, as speed can keep you safe. These lessons are part of their hunting education, crucial for reaching their destination successfully. James then led them into the forest to look for small game like grouse, porcupines, rabbits, and squirrels on the ground and under the trees. After a fruitless 2-hour search, they had to move on by snowmobile. Sometimes, game appears unexpectedly, like a squirrel James spotted on a tree along the road. Since Joseph had not yet hit a target, James gave him this chance to prove himself. Hitting a moving target is even harder when you can't hit a stationary one. As expected, Joseph missed his first shot, but the experienced squirrel didn't run far. Moving closer, Joseph pulled the trigger again, and the squirrel fell from the tree. Most animals are lean at this time of year, but this squirrel was still fat, indicating it had stored plenty of food for winter. However, James planned to use it to feed the dogs, seemingly just for Joseph to practice shooting. Back home, a large iron pot hung over the fire seemed ready to cook the squirrel, but was actually for preparing food for their sled dogs, with the squirrel merely an extra treat. Taking one small life to sustain another is the way of life for the indigenous people. It may sound harsh, but it's simply the cycle of the food chain in action. It's May in Tanana, and the snow is melting from the land, indicating an empty refrigerator, and that it's time to hunt geese to replenish supplies. Every spring, geese returning from the south rest briefly at a fishing lake 60 kilometers southeast of Tanana. To secure this food, the indigenous people risk crossing the melting river ice, a pursuit locals consider the most dangerous form of hunting. Before officially starting the goose hunt, Stan and Charlie first scouted the route. For the first 45 kilometers, everything was normal. However, 5 kilometers from Fish Lake, they encountered a dangerous situation where the ice had collapsed, potentially trapping snowmobiles. For the safety of other hunters, they placed several warning signs at the site, signaling hunters not to proceed further. Then, Stan and Charlie returned to the town to strategize. A 5-kilometer stretch of the usual route was impassable, and they needed to find a safe alternative to reach the geese. They called the younger generation from the town, as geese were the only food source available in spring. Normally, they would follow the river to Fish Lake, but now the last 5 kilometers were unusable. They had to carve out a new 3-kilometer route through the adjacent woods. After finalizing the plan, 5 snowmobiles loaded with equipment set out for the destination. To quickly clear the 3-kilometer forest path, the group decided to split up. Stan and Joey advanced from the collapse towards Fish Lake, while Charlie and Bob started from Fish Lake towards Tanana. They were cautious, as reaching Fish Lake didn't guarantee a safe return after hunting. This new path was also being cleared for their return. As they cleared the brush, geese flew overhead, indicating their presence in the area, which sped up the clearing work. 4 hours later, only 1 kilometer remained uncleared when Stan's chainsaw ran out of fuel. They had only brought one chainsaw, and although their snowmobiles had fuel, it wasn't directly usable for the chainsaw, which required a specific mix of gasoline and oil. They marked the newly opened path to prevent getting lost in the woods. Eventually, the two groups successfully met and proceeded together to Fish Lake for hunting. Stan and Joey chose to hunt in a meltwater area, which attracted thirsty geese. They used abundant dry grass to build hides, as geese would avoid unfamiliar objects. Thus, the hides were made from nearby branches and dry grass. Charlie and Bob also completed their hunting setup 500 meters away on the lakeshore with similar materials. Now everything was ready, just waiting for the geese to arrive. Although geese had been spotted during the route clearing, they were now delayed. Joey resorted to his last trick, using an old shell casing heated with a lighter to create an oval notch, making a whistle that mimicked goose calls. Charlie, on the other hand, used no tools but could mimic goose calls by placing 2 fingers in his mouth, a traditional indigenous method taught by elders. After some calling, geese were indeed attracted. When they flew overhead, the hunters opened fire, and one unlucky goose fell into the lake a few hundred meters away. Retrieving it risked falling through the ice. Despite the danger, Joey drove his snowmobile at high speed towards the prey. Charlie and Stan worried about his safety, as too slow a speed might lead to falling through the ice, and too fast could cause a crash. Reaching the goose, Joey couldn't stop the snowmobile. He had to control it with one hand while retrieving the prey with the other, then accelerated away from the dangerous area. The risk was worth it, not just for the meat, but because the first goose served a more crucial role. Placed on the ground, it attracted other geese, creating a realistic hunting scene with their calls. This combination of using the goose and mimicking calls effectively lured more geese. Soon, more geese flew towards them. They didn't need the geese to land nearby. Flying within shooting range was enough. Thomas took a shot when they were close enough and hit one, which fell directly without the need to retrieve it from the lake. Joey pointed in the direction of 3 more geese. With one pull of the trigger, another goose fell. The decoy geese seemed to be working. Each goose they acquired was used as bait, and the more they placed, the better the lure. Charlie and Bob, positioned a few hundred meters away, also had success. Geese continuously passed overhead, leaving 1 or 2 with each flyover, and at times, 3 at once, all shot by Charlie. When he went to collect the game, he noticed a new danger. Just 1 day had passed, and the surface of Fish Lake already had several centimeters of water. In their childhood, such hunting activities could last a week without worrying about melting ice. As night fell, they camped in tents, hoping the colder overnight temperatures would refreeze the lake surface so they could continue for a few more days. The next day, Stan checked the route home early and saw extensive meltwater areas. indicating their hunting trip needed to end any later, and they would be trapped by the melting Yukon River. Stan informed Charlie, who was still hunting. Even though it was hard to leave, they had to go. Yesterday, they faced a solid ice layer. Today, it was open water. Small water bodies thaw first, followed by river ice. Hundreds of meters away, the younger hunters were still immersed in the joy of goose hunting, unaware that the route back was disappearing. Stan's arrival interrupted their rhythm. With the lake water already a foot deep, Stan urged them to pack up. Joey wanted to stay for the peak of the goose migration that evening. Stan might have allowed an extra day for other matters, but not for this. George had died because of such risks 3 years ago. A stark lesson. This time he insisted they return now. Reluctantly, Joey and the other young hunters packed up. While meat was important, it paled in comparison to their lives. The melted path was fully thawed, and the jungle road they had cleared played a crucial role. While others hunted, James arrived at the airport to receive a new shipment. His firewood business was no longer viable due to cut timber, forcing him to find an alternative. He paid a high price for a mysterious package from Fairbanks, a set of tools for sawing lumber. These tools could attach a chainsaw to the wood and cut logs into planks. It was the cheapest and most convenient sawing tool available. James assembled and tested it immediately. He fixed the guide rail to the log with nails and started the chainsaw to cut. This method couldn't compare to large sawmills in efficiency, but for an isolated place like Tanana, it was sufficient. The planks were rough, but usable. All planks in the town were air freighted from Fairbanks, and James wanted to do business selling locally cut planks. He had a lot of planks cut. The real question was whether people would buy them. A good salesperson knows how to market, and James took his freshly cut planks to a neighbor building a house. Although rough, the cedar planks were sufficient for construction. His neighbor immediately ordered planks for his house. This news would spread across the town overnight, and those in need would seek him out. James was a natural businessman. If he had a large sawmill, he'd monopolize the town's lumber business. The Yukon River, frozen for 8 months, finally entered its thawing period. Charlie was among those eagerly awaiting this time, primarily concerned with the river's ice conditions. Currently, the water level was at a safe stage, but safety depended on whether the upstream ice jams would block the flow. Such a blockage could turn the town into part of the river. The Tanana River, with shallower waters, usually thaws a day or two before the Yukon River. The real concern was the Yukon's thick ice, some reaching over 2 meters. Charlie met with pilot Seth at the airport, and they flew upstream to inspect the situation. A few kilometers upstream, the ice had not yet melted, blocking the floating ice from moving downstream. If blocked long enough, it could form a dam, and when it broke, the town would suffer. For now, there was a safe distance in the water level, and residents needed to stay alert to changes. Most would avoid water travel during this period, though some, like Joey, took advantage of the gap to hunt. The Tanana River was already open water, and Joey wanted to hunt geese on the opposite bank before the Yukon's ice arrived. Knowing the situation upstream, Charlie knew he couldn't dissuade the young man from hunting geese. He simply warned Joey to return before the ice melted. Joey launched his boat, taking his hunting dog across to the opposite shore. The Tanana was only a few days ahead in thawing, with many floating ice remnants. These appeared small above water, but extended 1 to 2 meters below, weighing 2 tons, enough to severely damage his small boat. Despite Joey's skilled piloting, the boat collided with an ice floe, and water started leaking into the cabin. Joey quickly grabbed an axe from his toolkit to try tightening the rivets. The collision had broken one, and while hammering slowed the leak, it didn't stop it. He had to bail water while navigating through the ice to reach the hunting spot. Once ashore, Joey quickly set up a hunting blind with branches and burlap. With the migration ending, only a few straggler geese remained. After setting up the blind, he made a whistle from a shell casing to attract the geese. Soon, 2 responded. Joey stealthily loaded his shotgun and approached, managing to shoot one before it could fly away. Having secured his game, he was ready to face the risks of the return journey. The longer he stayed, the greater the danger of returning. As the boat cabin filled with water, Joey prepared to head back. Arriving at the riverbank, he discovered his hunting dog was missing. Calls yielded no response. The gunfire might have scared it. Despite Joey's efforts to acclimate it to gunfire over the winter, It seemed ineffective. Carrying his rifle, Joey searched the nearby area, finding fresh black bear tracks in the damp soil. His dog had never encountered a black bear and might bark at one. Joey continued calling without reply. Meanwhile, 5 kilometers away on Guanlan Mountain, Charlie watched every movement on the river. The ice showed signs of melting, yet the water was still, which worried him more, like the quiet before a storm. Soon, Stan joined him at the summit, unaware that Joey had gone hunting across the river. Unable to deter the young man, Charlie informed Stan of the situation. As they spoke, the Yukon's ice began to move. It seemed Joey might be trapped on the other side. Unaware of the situation on the Yukon River, Joey had been searching for his hunting dog for over an hour without any luck. He decided not to continue searching, knowing his dog's stubborn nature. It was the type that wouldn't move forward even when pulled, and would back off when pushed. Sitting by the campfire, Joey plucked the geese he had risked his life to hunt during the Yukon's ice melt. He usually plucked his game back home. He knew the dog's character well enough. So, he plucked the geese roughly and roasted them over the fire, hoping the smell of cooking meat would lure the dog back. Sure enough, as soon as the aroma spread, the dog emerged from the bushes. It was ironic that a hunting dog would be scared of gunshots, but quickly come running at the smell of food. Joey, not typically a soft character, wondered how he ended up with such a goofy dog. While Joey was still enjoying the success of his goose hunt, a bush plane flew low towards him. The floating ice on the Yukon had blocked his way back, but he was oblivious to this until the plane circled overhead, a sure sign of trouble. This plane was arranged by Stan and Charlie to deliver a message to him. With no suitable landing spots in the area, the plane dropped a package for him after circling and then left. Joey had never before had supplies delivered in such a manner. He ran to the package and found a barrel of fuel with a note from Stan attached. The note explained that the floating ice was passing through Tanana, and he couldn't return the way he came. He was directed to head to a town 90 kilometers away, with enough fuel in the barrel to get there. Now realizing the severity of his situation, Joey quickly packed up to head back. What Stan didn't know was that Joey's boat had been damaged on the way there, and now he had to bail water continuously to keep it from sinking. Known as the must-sink, the boat in its current condition was definitely not capable of making a 90-kilometer journey. Joey considered risking a crossing of the Yukon River, but found the ice flow at its peak when he reached the confluence of the two rivers. It was impossible to cross what looked more like a mudslide than a river. The town was just 300 to 500 meters away across the river, and Joey watched from the confluence, hoping for a brief opportunity. However, the moving Yukon River offered no such chance, with continuous ice flow from upstream. As the sun set and without camping gear, he couldn't stay outdoors overnight. Across the river, Stan kept an eye on the Yukon's floating ice and spotted Joey trying to cross. With the current flow, crossing was impossible. Stan didn't know why his son hadn't headed to Manly but suspected there must be a reason. He immediately drove to the airport, where Charlie and Seth, having just delivered fuel to Joey, were still present. They had seen Joey retrieve the fuel barrel and assumed he was on his way to Manly. Learning from Stan that Joey was trying to cross the river, they guessed something must have gone wrong. Stan sought Seth's help to potentially fly Joey back. The banks of the Tanana River had just thawed, and landing a plane on the damp soil posed certain risks. Stan asked Seth to try landing if possible, but not to force it if conditions were too risky. Carrying their hopes, Seth flew back across the river as sunlight began to fade from the land. Upon spotting the plane, Joey immediately retreated to the banks of the Tanana River. Realizing there was only one pilot, he understood this was a rescue effort. However, Seth informed him directly that he would not be landing, not because he couldn't, but because the moist riverbank had no suitable landing spots. Eventually, Seth attempted a landing on a nearby sandbar inside the river. The plane, known for its rugged durability and cost-effectiveness, also had the advantage of needing only a short distance to take off and land, just 20 to 30 meters. Some record-setting pilots could even land it on a helipad. Thanks to Seth's expert flying skills, Joey was rescued from his predicament. Standing by the Yukon River, Joey felt its power for the first time, growing a deeper respect for its might. In the blink of an eye, they landed at the town's airport. To show his gratitude, Joey decided to take Seth hunting for moose next time. Survival here was tough, and mutual assistance was crucial among them. Courtney planned to build a smokehouse before the fish river season. She sketched the basic structure on paper before starting construction. To finish quickly, she called her cousin Joy for help. Unlike other families where men handled external tasks and women managed internal ones, Courtney was the pillar of her household. She not only took care of her 2 children and managed dozens of sled dogs, but also handled the hunting during the season. Truly a strong woman of the town. She planned to construct a 2-story smokehouse frame from logs, then cover it with tin roofing. Inside, a smoker would cure stored meat. She had already erected the 4 posts and called Joy to help build the upper sections. The smokehouse was built for functionality, not beauty, and the construction was rough. Horizontal beams were simply nailed together. In just an hour or 2, the basic frame was up. They had hoped to finish the roof in one go, but Courtney ran out of materials. They had to pause their work and drive to the creek to collect more logs. This small creek, a tributary of the Yukon River, often brought quality logs during high water. Many people wondered why there was so much wood in the Yukon River. Most of it came from floodwaters during the thaw. After collecting enough logs, they completed the smokehouse roof. With the frame in place, the rest was easy. After completing the walls, the fireplace will be moved in. The smokehouse is now 90% complete. The remaining 10% is Courtney's own innovation. She wrapped a tree trunk with a waterproof sheet and secured it with a nail gun. Other families' smokehouses are just drafty sheds. But Courtney, known as the town's skilled carpenter, after completing the smokehouse, Courtney immediately called Moore. In just one day, their yard gained a new smokehouse. Moore has always adored his daughter. Seeing his son Thomas, he often felt frustrated. Hunter Stan loaded several barrels of fuel onto his small boat. Fishing on the Yukon River after the thaw is their immediate task. In the isolated town of Tanana, freedom dictates everything. What they do is entirely up to them. Although their life seems the same each year, hunting, fishing, chopping wood, and surviving the winter, each year is slightly different in their struggle against extreme weather. Today, Stan is heading to the upstream fishing camp, where he spends half of the summer. Fishing wheels have started appearing on the Yukon River, and Stan's is among them. They have been used by riverbank residents for 30 years, a simple invention from their ancestors that has sustained them for a lifetime. Stan lowers the fishing net and releases the ropes so the net can rotate with the water flow, catching fish as they pass and dropping them into a fish box. He hopes to return tomorrow to a full catch. While others are using fishing wheels, Charlie sticks to the more traditional fishing nets, which usually require 2 people to operate. So his eldest daughter helps him. Tanisha has been learning to fish since she could walk, and her skills are no less than any man's, perhaps even better. The nets they set are perfectly straight. Charlie and his daughter are just trying to find the best fishing spots to later position their fishing wheel where the fish are most abundant. If the nets catch plenty, Charlie's fishing season will start tomorrow. As they were heading back, thick smoke from a distant wildfire caught their attention. The fire was rapidly approaching Tanana, visible to the naked eye. Dry weather was causing wildfires to rage across Alaska. Overnight, the fire had burned 15 kilometers north of the town. Joey had heard about the wildfires occurring everywhere this year, but did not realize how close this one was to their home. He immediately sought out his father at the fishing camp. Stan, the town's fire chief, had to organize a firefighting effort before official firefighters arrived. When he heard the fire had consumed 15 kilometers overnight, he was shocked. Their trapping cabin and trapping lines, essential for their livelihood, likely turned to ash last night. But now was not the time for grief. Without taking action, Tanana could burn down before the firefighters arrived. Firefighters from all directions are rushing to the town. Since the roads are not yet open, Joey can only use a boat to pick them up upstream. The smoke from the blazing fire has already enveloped the town, and the women and children are packing up to evacuate. If they delay any longer, planes might not be able to land. Yesterday, there were just a few fire spots approaching the town, but today it has turned into a fire dragon attacking them. This wildfire has already destroyed 1.2 million acres of wilderness. Fortunately, forest firefighters have arrived in town. For now, only the firefighters have reached. Large firefighting aircraft and helicopters have not yet been dispatched. The fire chief has gathered the remaining residents for a meeting to discuss mobilizing all available human and material resources to build fire breaks until the arrival of large firefighting aircraft. Charlie and Joey's task is to bring more firefighters here. To transport more people per trip, currently, forest firefighters are building fire breaks a few kilometers north of town. There is a lack of manpower on the east side, creating a defensive gap. James, a local logger, and other residents are constructing a fire break here, which involves cutting down about 500 large trees in this forest. Sometimes it's hard to believe such lush greenery could ignite a wildfire, but in fact, everything can burn in front of a 1,000-degree fire. The blaze has already reached the outermost road of the town. Stan and Joey's houses are just on the other side of this road, less than a kilometer away. In windy conditions, the fire could reach their front doors in minutes. Stan and the firefighters' task is to hold this last line of defense. There's no time left to clear the fire break. The quickest method is to set controlled burns to eliminate the combustible material in the forest. This is also the riskiest method, as a change in wind direction could have disastrous consequences. To prevent accidents, they have prepared a fire truck in the rear. Monitoring the fire truck's water level is Stan's responsibility. He needs to watch the indicator lights on the truck. 3 lights mean there's 3/4 left. Several kilometers away on the Yukon River, Charlie is transporting more firefighters to the fire scene by boat. They represent the town's last hope. After hearing that a nearby lake was also being ravaged by the wildfire, Charlie drove his boat there after dropping off the firefighters. Upon reaching the shore, he saw nothing but scorched earth. This area wasn't residential, but was significant to him personally. For the past 20 years, Charlie had hunted moose here annually, providing winter meat for his family. His canoe and camping gear stored here were also reduced to ashes, likely burned by the fire yesterday. Indigenous people have relied on hunting and fishing for thousands of years. Now, with fewer caribou and the moose hunting area burned, it's uncertain what will sustain them. On the other side, Stan also felt the pressure. The fire truck's water was half gone, and at the current rate, it could only last another hour. He urgently called Moore on the car radio to bring the other green water tanker from town. Faced with the intense flames from the wildfire, the water tank was quickly down to its last indicator light. If he couldn't ensure the safety of these firefighters, Stan felt it would be his responsibility, as this was his sole task in this wildfire. On the east side of the town, James and other residents are building another fire break. They need to cut down 500 large trees. After more than 10 hours of hard work, they gradually formed a fire break about 10 meters wide. Without the arrival of large firefighting aircraft, it would be very difficult for them alone to extinguish this wildfire. Meanwhile, Stan's fire truck started to sound an alarm. Just as he was getting anxious, he finally saw the town's water tanker approaching them. He immediately refilled the depleted fire truck, allowing the firefighters to precisely control the fire break. However, there was more good news. Minutes later, a firefighting helicopter flew overhead, marking the arrival of the first batch of aerial support, giving them a glimpse of victory. This was quickly followed by large firefighting aircraft, their last hope to extinguish the wildfire. A large plane like this could drop 90 tons of water per hour. Additionally, firefighting helicopters and gliders were deployed. Retardants and water were dropped from various directions onto the fire area. The arrival of the firefighting aircraft meant that ground personnel could breathe a little easier. No fire is too big in front of these aircraft. If any fire continued to burn through the retardant, another pass would extinguish it completely. Less intense fires were handled by helicopters, while a glider made repeated drops, saving Tanana from the wildfire. Although the town was saved, 3 million acres of forest north of the town were turned to ash. The local residents' way of life, reliant on the land, will have to change. The forest will not recover for the next 3 to 5 years. When misfortune strikes, they can only try their best to endure through these difficult times. Stan caught his first mink in Alaska right here, believing he could survive off this land. He maintained this lifestyle for over 40 years, which is now gone. Stan soon spotted a large animal trap on the scorched earth, meant for trapping large gray wolves and wolverines. The fire had warped the trap, requiring repairs before use. With the forest gone, trapping was no longer feasible. Today, Stan was heading to a cabin 60 kilometers away, his first home in Alaska. If the cabin was destroyed, his trapping career would be completely over. Heading north, all he saw was ash. He had built a refuge cabin 20 kilometers north for himself and passing hunters. Now, Only some bottles and jars remained on the ground. The cabin was gone. This refuge had always provided safety during storms with temperatures down to -50 degrees. The 60-kilometer trip had only one shelter, but it was not time to grieve yet. He hoped the cabin was not in the same condition. The path to his cabin, usually accessible in winter, was now indistinguishable after the fire. With no drivable road, Stan had to hike, just like his first time. All along the way, he saw nothing but scorched earth. But, 100 meters from the cabin, he was surprised to find the area untouched by the fire, reigniting his hope. Sometimes, nature works in mysterious ways. The forest across the river and less than 100 meters behind had been touched by the fire, but the area around the cabin was unscathed. As long as the cabin stood, Stan's roots and his ideal life could continue. Although the land and wildlife would take a long time to recover, hope remained.